Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to another video, and by now all 10 F1 teams have shown their new car for the 2020 season, so I thought it would be a fun idea to rank all the new cars in order of how good they look. So just to clarify, this video is just talking about the aesthetics of the car, not how fast it is, not how competitive it is, just my personal opinion on which car looks best. Before I start, I need to clarify that this is my opinion. If you disagree with me, that's completely fine, tell me what you think in the comments below. So without further ado, let's begin with Ferrari. The 2020 car looks virtually the same as the 2019 car with only some slight changes. The new front wing is completely red as opposed to the mixture of black and red from last year, and the numbers are reminiscent of some of Ferrari's classic cars from the early 80s, probably to celebrate this year being their 1000th race in F1. Overall, there's not much to say about this new car, and to be honest, I think the 2019 car looks a little better, but nonetheless, it's still a great looking car that I'd rate 4 out of 5. Going on to Red Bull, and again, the 2020 car looks pretty much exactly the same as the 2019 car. The only noticeable difference is the new nose of the 2020 car looking completely distinct from any other team on the grid. Other than that though, it looks even more similar to last year's car than Ferrari does to their 2019 car. But there's no reason to fix what isn't broken, and the Red Bull livery is still as iconic as ever, so I'll give it another 4 out of 5. Coming on to Mercedes, and the main change from last year is the inclusion of Ineos as a new sponsor, adding red accents all over the car. I know this new livery has lots of fans, but I'm not one of them. Again, I want to stress this is my opinion, but for me, I think the inclusion of red just looks out of place and weird. The new car also has a solid blue stripe down the side rather than the brighter blue and white stripe from last year, which in my opinion looked a lot better. Overall, I think this car looks worse than last year's, but it still is a solid livery, and I'll give it a 3.5 out of 5. It's also worth noting the 2020 car retains the red star on the engine cover in honour of the late 3-time world champion Niki Lauda. Coming on to Williams, and I think this new car looks way better than their 2019 car in my opinion. Last year's car looked way more rushed and lazy compared to this new 2020 car, and I think it's probably the most improved team aesthetic wise from 2019 to 2020. On last year's car, the rocket sponsoring looked more slapped on, whereas this new car has the rocket sponsoring on a solid red background, making it pop out more. Overall, this livery is a massive improvement from last year, and this may be an unpopular opinion, but I think this car looks great, and I'll give it a 4.5 out of 5. Coming on to Haas, and in my opinion, I think this is their best livery since they joined F1 in 2016. After the black and gold rich energy car from last year, they've gone for the same style as before 2019 with a white and red palette. For me, this new car looks way more striking than some of their dreary cars from a couple years back, particularly their 2017 car. Overall, I'll give it another 4.5 out of 5. It looks so simple, but it is without question the best looking car they've made so far. Coming on to McLaren, and I know I'll make a ton of people mad by saying this, but I'm not a huge fan of this new car. In my opinion, the new matte livery just doesn't suit the McLaren. I think they would have been better off keeping it gloss like the last couple years. Also, the two blue stripes on the sides of the car fading into the black just looks weird and a bit out of place in my opinion. And I think the halo looked better in black, but instead they decided to change it to the same matte orange to fit the rest of the car. Even though I'm criticising it a lot, it still is without a doubt a pretty solid looking car, and overall I'll give it a 3.5 out of 5. Now coming on to AlphaTauri, and in my opinion this is one of the best looking cars on the grid. The team's debut car goes for a white and navy blue livery, completely different from last year's Toro Rosso. Similar to the Haas, this new design is pretty simple. With the exception of the Honda sponsoring, it's literally only 2 colours. I think it's this simplicity that makes me like it so much. Like, look at Braun for example. It's so simple, yet many would consider it one of the best looking F1 cars of all time. Overall, I love this new livery, and I'll give it a 4.5 out of 5, with it probably being my favourite looking car on the 2020 grid. Now coming on to Alfa Romeo, and there's not a whole lot to talk about. It looks pretty similar to last year's car with the addition of a couple new sponsors. Personally, I think the new sponsors make the car look more cluttered and messy than last year, but nonetheless it's still a decent looking car. Overall, I'd give the 2020 Alfa Romeo a 3.5 out of 5. On to Racing Point, and the main difference between the 2019 and 2020 cars is the absence of Sport Pacer, with BWT once again becoming their main sponsor. Last year's car had this massive patch of blue on the engine cover, which to me just looked weird and rushed, so I'm happy the 2020 car looks way simpler and neater. The BWT sponsoring is still way too big and in your face, but to be honest, I don't have any more problems with the livery, and I'll give it another 3.5 out of 5. And finally on to Renault, and they're using a completely black livery for testing, but have stated they will return to their regular black and yellow livery come Australia. Last year's Renault was one of my favourite looking cars, so I think it's safe to say I like the 2020 car as well, so I'll give it a 4 out of 5. So now I've given my opinions about how good I think each 2020 F1 car looks, and if I had to put them in order from worst to best, it would go Alfa Romeo, Racing Point, Mercedes, McLaren, Red Bull, Ferrari, Renault, Williams, Haas, and my favourite looking car, AlphaTauri. Again, I just want to emphasise this is my opinion. I know a lot of you will disagree with this video, especially with my thoughts about Mercedes and McLaren. But as I said before, you can leave your opinions in the comment section below if you'd like to tell me your own thoughts about these new 2020 cars. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you all next week for another video. Bye!